Hi kids. Let's talk some more about these Strombergs. I know part one I did it out here in the garage at night and it was really dark out here and hard to see. I apologize for that. So we'll go over some of this a little bit a second time. This is a 1500. I showed you the 1100 and the 1400. This is a 1500, which is virtually identical to the 1400 except it has a dial light. And you can see this one is in pretty nice shape. It's got, the paint is missing in spots, but this one's in pretty nice shape. And this has the complete dial. You can see that nice plastic dial, but it has the numbers and the Stromberg Carlson on there. And really nice orange dial indicator. And the 1500, the dial light, here, let me show you. Let me set this aside for a second. This, of course, is the guts of the 1400. And the dial light on that 1500 is actually under, it comes out right about there. There's a little cutout at the bottom of this for the dial light, and so it sort of helps that orange plastic dial indicator catch the light and make it easier to see. So I might do something like that on this one. I've got enough room under there, I think. Just have to make sure you can mount it where it's actually not going to actually get in the way of the dial indicator as it moves back and forth. But if I can't do that, I'll go ahead and stick it over on the side like I said I was going to. Anyway, the big problem with this one, I bought it off eBay for nothing, basically. It was dirt cheap, and I think the reason was somebody tried to fix it and failed. And what they did, I think we talked about this last time, I'll go over it again real quick, bring this up closer. Down here is the original electrolytic can connections. They disconnected everything from it and they moved them all over to this terminal strip, and the two electrolytics are grounded to the chassis, whereas originally they were running to this floating ground. A floating ground has the ground isolated from the chassis. It goes to the electrolytics to the negative side, and it does not go to the chassis, which sort of gives you a little bit extra protection against a shock hazard. But whoever worked on this, they tried to move the grounds to the chassis, which is fine. You can do that, but then you make it a hot chassis and you sort of increase the shock risk. But what they did wrong is this bundle of wire and this bundle of wire, several wires, they ran them to the terminal strip, and now they're not going to the floating ground or the chassis. They should be grounded somewhere, and they're not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo all of this. I'm going to take this terminal strip out and probably put a different one in over here where the selenium rectifier is, because it's going away. Going to be replaced with a silicon diode. And I'm going to reconnect everything to the negatives of the floating ground. It's okay to reuse the negatives. You don't want to reuse the positive sides of the original electrolytics. You want to take those out of the circuit, but it's okay to reuse the negatives. I've done it many times, and it works fine. And that way this radio will be wired up the way it's supposed to be, and it should work fine. I've already tested it. I've taken the test leads and run everything back to the proper ground, and it works fairly well. But it'll work a lot better once we do it properly and replace this selenium rectifier with a diode. And I also want to test all the resistors and everything, because nobody's done any of that yet. So I'm going to work on that a little bit, and then I'll come back and show you where we're at. So stay tuned. Okay, let me show you what I've done. So I have cleaned up that mess quite a bit. I have taken all those extra wires and things that were in here and gotten rid of them. I got rid of the old terminal strip that was over here, and I want to put one of these new ones in there. I'm going to use the mounting screw for the selenium rectifier. I'm just going to shorten that up and put the new mounting strip over here. Reconnecting things to the negatives of the floating grounds got rid of a lot of extra bits of wire and things that had been spliced onto the ends of things, and it'll just clean things up a lot, and then probably mean the radio won't hum as much as it would have with all that extra junk in there taking up space and running the wrong way and everything else. So what I've done is I've just marked the connections with some tape. This is where the one electrolytic, the positive from that, is going to go to those, and the same with this bundle down here. Just have them marked. And then I'm going to put the new, with the terminal strip, I'll put the new silicone diode in and a new resistor and everything. And the other thing I want to do while we're at it, well, this needs some other work too, because a lot of these are just really badly done. They're just J-hooked to the old leads and not very well insulated. And, you know, like this one down here is very close to the side of the chassis, and it's not insulated very well. The heat shrink is on part of the lead, but it's not on any of the old lead. You know, so it's not really doing anybody any good. It's very close to shorting out to the side of the chassis. So, and there's, most of them are like that. But anyway, what I was saying is the other thing I want to do while we're rewiring this thing the right way is copy this. This is the 1500, which has the light bulb. You can see the light bulb. I misspoke in my earlier video. The cutout is not in the dial plate, obviously. It's in this piece underneath it. There's the cutout for that bulb. And the wiring on the bulb is very simple. As far as I can tell, and I'll have to double check all of this, but looking at the two radios and looking at the you know, schematics, they're identical except for the dial light. And all they did was they run the dial light, they made a hole in the chassis and ran the dial light through here, and they added one capacitor and a 22 ohm resistor. And so all I have to do is copy that on the 1400 and I'll have a working dial light. There's different ways to do it, but I'll probably just do it that way. And I was kind of testing things last night, and if I take a couple of these Zener diodes and run them across that 22 ohm resistor, just run them in parallel with it, it helps reduce the flare-up that you get on these dial lights on a radio like this. When you first power it on, they tend to flare up and then go really dim and then come back up about halfway. And it's hard on the bulb. It makes them burn out faster. It's really hard when they get that big surge of power right at the beginning every time you turn it on. So I'm going to put those Zener diodes in there, and that'll cut down on that. Otherwise, this one's interesting just to compare. They did put new capacitors in it, and I see one new resistor there, but they didn't do anything else with the resistors. I'll have to test all of those. And it looks like they just reused the original electrolytic. I really doubt that this has been restuffed. Sometimes you can open this capacitor can back here. You know, you can cut it open and put new capacitors in it and leave everything in place, and it looks nice and neat, but I really don't think they did that. I think this is running on its original electrolytic, so I'm going to have to redo all of that. But it's funny, I got this off of eBay for about 15 bucks, which is a damn good deal. But they said that it had, you know, the caps had been replaced. And it's like, well, yeah, a lot of them, but not the electrolytics. And it's just filthy, you know. Look at the dust on that thing, you know. And the tubes and everything. It was just like, you know, this, so it's certainly, they said it wasn't restored. They did say that. They said caps replaced, not restored. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the truth. I mean, the tuning capacitor is just covered with dust. It's just, but anyway, this one will be easier because, you know, it's already working fairly well. I just need to put new electrolytics in it and double check the resistors and everything. But anyway, we're going to do that. We're going to copy that dial light setup on this one, I think, and put those Zener diodes in there and everything to cut down on that flare up. And so once I get everything redone, get all my electrolytics back in there and get everything wired up correctly, I will come back and show you where we're at with that. Stay tuned.
Got the whole thing working out so right. Underneath my back,
I'd flunked out of college not once.
79645.
Talent and skill level.
Anyway, just giving you an idea here where we're at. You can see I got that dial light working. I don't have it permanently attached yet. I just have it hooked up with some test leads. And I don't have the Zener diodes in there yet to minimize that flare up that it does when you first turn it on. You can see that. I kind of wanted to show you that. So we'll try to show you when I get the Zeners installed, the difference. I think it'll, you'll see the difference. It's interesting. And then you can see this speaker. I had to patch the hell out of it. It's not the best speaker, but it'll do. I think if I can't make it work, I'll have to try to replace it. But the problem with these Strombergs is they whack the corner off the speakers to make it fit here next to the on-off volume control. So if I have to try to put a new speaker in here, I'll have to get the Dremel out and do something similar. Anyway, real quick look here. You can see, I don't put any new holes in the speaker. You can see, put a couple of terminal strips in. I put one down here to connect up the dial light. Use the same color wires as the ones on the other radio. And got a new terminal strip in here with the silicon diode to replace the old selenium rectifier, and new resistors, one for the rectifier, one for the dial light, and a couple of new capacitors in there. And I put one electrolytic down here under the terminal strip and one over here next to it, hooked up. There's the positive, there's the negative going back to the old floating ground, which is working great. You could hear that. I got a new line cord on here. I have to put a strain relief in, but there it is. Still have to go back and double check all of these connections because some of them are sloppy, like I said, and double check. I haven't tested all the resistors yet, so we'll be replacing some of those to try and make this thing work a little bit better. It's not doing too bad. Then we'll have to clean it up. You clean up the connections to the antenna. They're not the greatest. They're looking pretty sad. Clean up the tuning capacitor. Get the dust out of it. Maybe put new rubber grommets under it. Although the ones in there right now don't look too bad. They're pretty soft. I might go ahead and go with them. And oil up the bearings in this thing so it works smooth and all of that. And then we'll try to align it and make it work as best we can. So that's it for this segment. We'll be working on putting the dial light in permanently. Put the Zener diodes in to minimize that dial light flare up, and like everything I just said, with the resistors and all that. So I think this will be the end of part 2. Stay tuned for part 3. It'll be coming up pretty soon. We'll get all of that done and work on the cabinet a little bit and see if we can't get this thing buttoned up. So stay tuned for part 3, and thanks for watching.